In Lesson 13, we'll be continuing to work with fractions. In today's lesson, we'll be doing word problems that involve fractions. We'll be reading the problem and deciding which operation to use. Remember, as you view the tape, take careful notes. If I do a problem or explain a concept that you don't understand, stop the tape and find some help. Let's begin with an addition problem. Remember, in adding, some words we look for are sum and total. Here's an example. Mary had triplets that weighed 2 3/4 pounds, 1 7/8 pounds, and 3 1/2 pounds. Find their total weight. The word total tells us we want to add up the weights of the 3 triplets. So let's list each of the weights. Two 3/4, 1 7/8, and 3 1/2. And we need to add those up to find the total weight. So let's move it up so we'll have some room to add. Now, these are mixed numbers, so we have a couple of choices. We can add by adding the fractions and adding the whole numbers, or we can make them improper and add them as improper fractions. We'll go ahead in this one and leave them as mixed numbers. So since I'm doing an adding problem, I have to have the same denominators. And here I don't, so I need to find my common denominator. To find your common denominator, you start with your biggest denominator, which in this case is 8, and we check to see if the other denominators will divide into that, and they will. 4 and 2 will both go into 8. So we're going to change each of the other denominators to 8. So to do that, remember, we decide what we need to multiply by to turn this 4 into an 8. Whatever we multiply the 4 by, we also have to multiply the 3 by. We have to multiply by 2. We end up with 6/8. Then when we come down here, we already have the right denominator, so we can just put our numerator of 7 up there. Here we have to decide what do we have to multiply 2 by to get 8. We multiply 2 by 4 and 1 by 4. So we end up with 4/8. 4 is mighty hard to see. You just have to remember that's a 4. 4/8. So we're adding 6/8, 7/8, and 4/8. 6 and 7 is 13, plus 4 gives us 17/8. And when we add up our whole numbers, we end up with 2 plus 1 plus 3 gives us 6. So we have 6 and 17/8. Now, we never want to leave a whole number and an improper fraction. So we need to divide our improper fraction out, change it back to a mixed number. That would give us 2 and 1/8. And if we put that 2 with the 6 that we already had, we'll end up with 8 and 1/8. And we need to put the unit of measurement with it. We're finding the total weight, and their weights were in pounds, so we have 8 and 1/8 pounds. That's the total. Oh, we can't see that, can we? So let's move it up a little bit. We have 8 and 1/8 pounds. That's the total that the triplets weigh. If you don't like this technique for adding, remember, make them improper fractions and add up your improper fractions. That would work too. What we'd have, let's just go back and make the improper fractions. 2 3/4 would become 11/4. 1 7/8 would become 15/8. And 3 1/2 would become 7/2. and we'd have to find the common denominator with those and add those up. And what we'll actually get when we get through doing that will be the improper fraction you get from 8 1/8, which would be 65/8. So after we got our common denominator and did all of our work here, we'd end up with 65/8, which would be the same thing as 8 1/8. So if you prefer doing it that way, that would be fine. When we're doing word problems that involve subtraction, usually we're comparing two quantities. Or another kind of problem we might have is one in which we're checking to see how much we have left. So generally we're comparing things, or we're seeing how much is left. In this case, we're comparing two quantities. John is 5 3/4 feet tall. Sam is 6 1/2 feet. How much taller is Sam than John? So what we're doing is comparing the heights of Sam and John to see how much taller Sam is. So we're going to subtract. Now, since Sam is the tallest, we put his height down first and then John's height. So we have 6 1/2 minus 5 3/4. Now again, I left these as mixed numbers. We can do them as mixed numbers, or we can make them improper fractions, whichever you prefer. But I'm going to go ahead and do them as mixed numbers. So since I'm subtracting, I've got to find a common denominator. And again, in this case, my biggest denominator, 4, will work. So let's change these to 4s. So since this one, well, let's start at the top. I need to multiply by 2 to get 4, so I have to also multiply the 1 by 2. That gives me 2 4s. And on the bottom, I already have 4s, so I have 3 4s. Now, when I get ready to subtract, I can't subtract 3 from 2, so I'm going to have to borrow. So to make things clear, I'm going to rewrite all of this so we can see my whole mixed number. I have 6 and 2 4s, and I have 5 and 3 4s. So I can see what I'm subtracting. And I can't subtract 3 from 2, so I'm going to borrow. So I come over here to my 6 and borrow 1. That leaves me with a 5. That 1 that I borrowed has to be turned into 4s. Since my denominator is 4s, so I've got to make that 1 4 4s. Because when you borrow a whole, you're borrowing 4 4s. So that means we're now going to have 6 4s, because 2 4s plus the 4 4s would give us 6 4s. And then down here we still have our 3 4s. So when we get ready to subtract, we're subtracting the 3 4s from the 6 4s. That's going to leave us with 3 4s. And the 5 from the 5 will leave us with 0. And we're talking about how much taller, and the height is measured in feet, so we'd want to put the feet in our answer. So how much taller is Sam than John? Sam is 3 4 of a foot taller. Now if you wanted to use the improper fractions, we'll go ahead and do it with improper fractions. We would take the 6 1/2 and make it 13 halves. 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13. The 5 3 4s, we'd make improper. 4 times 5 is 20, plus 3 is 23 4s. And get our common denominator here, which will still be 4. So we'd multiply by 2, we'd have 26 4s. And down here, we would just copy our 23 over there since we already have 4s. And then when we subtracted, we'd end up with 3/4 of a pound. So if you prefer doing it that way, make them improper before you subtract. Both ways we have to have a common denominator. Uh-oh, I just realized we're talking about, go back to the original problem up here. We're talking about how much taller is Sam than John, and things are being measured in feet. So my answer is 3/4 of a foot. I need to make sure here I have the same thing when I did it with improper. Don't have pounds, I have a part of a foot. So my answer would be 3/4 of a foot.